She's clearly unstable. My mother said those words while sitting across from a psychiatric evaluator, holding a folder filled with fabricated medical notes about me. And beside her, my father nodded silently, like this entire nightmare was completely reasonable. Meanwhile, I was 27 years old, married, fully employed, financially independent, and somehow my own parents were trying to force me into a psychiatric hold because they hated the man I married. My name is Sophia Bennett, and the moment I married the wrong person, my family decided I was mentally unfit to make my own decisions. The terrifying part, they almost succeeded. It started 6 months after my wedding, or more accurately, 6 months after I stopped obeying my parents. Because according to them, my marriage wasn't the real problem. Control was. Growing up in our family meant following invisible rules constantly. Dress correctly, speak carefully, choose approved friends, date approved men, and most importantly, never embarrass the family publicly, especially my mother. She treated reputation like religion. Everything revolved around appearances, perfect church attendance, perfect holiday photos, perfect social image. Meanwhile, real emotions stayed hidden behind closed doors. Arguments whispered, pain minimized, problems denied. From the outside, we looked like one of those polished upper-class families everyone secretly envied. Inside, love was conditional, especially for me, because unlike my older sister Claire, I questioned things. I moved to Boston after college, built my own career in graphic design, started making decisions without permission, and eventually I fell in love with someone my parents absolutely hated. His name was Daniel Reyes. Warm, funny, brilliant, the kind of man who made rooms feel safer instead of smaller. But according to my parents, he was unacceptable, not because he treated me badly, because he came from the wrong background, different ethnicity, different income level, different social circle. Everything my parents secretly judged people for while pretending to be morally superior publicly. At first, they disguised their racism as concern. You grew up differently. Marriage becomes harder across cultures. You'll regret limiting your future. All carefully worded, carefully ugly. Then, when I refused ending the relationship, their behavior escalated fast. Suddenly, my mother cried constantly. My father stopped speaking to me normally. Relatives called privately pressuring me to reconsider. And when Daniel proposed, everything exploded completely. My mother actually collapsed dramatically during dinner, not emotionally, performatively, like a woman starring in her own tragedy. "You're destroying this family," she sobbed loudly. But honestly, I still believed things would calm down eventually, because normal parents don't destroy relationships over marriage disagreements. Right? I was wrong, very wrong. The wedding itself happened quietly, small ceremony, close friends, no family from my side except my younger cousin Olivia. And despite the heartbreak, I was happy, actually happy. For the first time in years, my life finally felt peaceful, until 6 months later, when my mother called crying hysterically at 7 a.m., Sophia, she whispered shakily, your father collapsed. Fear overrides logic instantly when it involves family. I drove straight to my parents' house, still wearing pajamas under my coat. But the second I walked inside, something felt wrong. Too quiet. No ambulance. No panic. No hospital bags. Instead, two strangers sat inside the living room beside my parents. One man, one woman, professional clothes, clipboards. And suddenly, my stomach dropped because I recognized the logo on the folder instantly. Behavioral Psychiatric Services. What is this? I whispered. My mother immediately started crying harder. We're trying to help you. Help. Manipulative people always weaponize that word before doing something cruel. The older woman stood carefully. Mrs. Reyes, she said professionally, your parents expressed concerns regarding severe emotional instability following recent impulsive life decisions. Impulsive life decisions, meaning my marriage. I stared at them in disbelief. You told people I'm mentally unstable? My father finally spoke calmly, too calmly. You've been behaving irrationally for months. I almost laughed from shock, because suddenly I realized this wasn't emotional panic. This was planned, carefully planned. Folders already organized, evaluators already scheduled, false concern already rehearsed. And then my mother handed over the document that changed everything. A fake timeline of concerning behavior, mood instability, isolation, paranoia, impulsive decision-making. Every normal adult boundary I established after marriage twisted into psychiatric symptoms. My chest tightened painfully because suddenly I understood something terrifying. My parents genuinely believed controlling me was love, and anyone taking that control away became the enemy. Even me. You're trying to institutionalize me because I married someone you don't approve of, I whispered. No, my mother cried dramatically. We're trying to save you before things get worse. The evaluator looked uncomfortable now, because even she could sense something felt deeply wrong here. But my parents were convincing, very convincing. Years of social status taught them exactly how to perform concern publicly. And honestly, for one horrifying moment, I realized how easily abusive families can weaponize mental health systems against their own children, especially daughters who stop obeying. Then my mother made one final mistake. She reached for my wedding ring suddenly, actually tried pulling it off my hand. This marriage changed you, she snapped. And in that exact second, everything became crystal clear. This was never about mental illness. It was punishment. Punishment for choosing my own life. I pulled my hand away immediately and walked toward the door shaking with rage. But before leaving, I turned back once and quietly said the sentence that eventually destroyed them publicly. If you ever try this again, I whispered, I'll expose everything. At the time, they laughed because they thought they still controlled the story. What they didn't know was that Daniel had already documented something devastating months earlier, something hidden inside one ordinary photograph. A photograph so damaging it would completely destroy the image my parents spent decades protecting, because the people trying to label me mentally unstable were secretly hiding a scandal of their own. When I got home, Daniel immediately knew something happened. Not because I explained it, because trauma changes the way people enter rooms. My hands shook uncontrollably. I couldn't sit still, couldn't breathe normally. And honestly, part of me still couldn't process what just happened. My own parents attempted to build a psychiatric case against me. Not over addiction, not over violence, not over actual instability, over marriage. Daniel listened silently while I explained everything. The fake reports, the evaluators, the manipulation. And instead of looking shocked, he looked angry, very angry. "Sophia," he said quietly, "this isn't normal controlling behavior anymore." I knew that already, but hearing someone else say it out loud made the situation feel terrifyingly real. Then he walked toward his office desk, quietly, opened a locked drawer, and pulled out printed photographs. Dozens of them. "What are these?" I whispered. Daniel hesitated briefly, then answered carefully. "Insurance." That word immediately terrified me, because people don't collect insurance unless they expect danger. And suddenly, I realized something horrifying. Daniel saw warning signs about my family long before I fully accepted them myself. But the photo he finally showed me exposed a secret my parents buried for 23 years. At first, the photograph looked ordinary, just an old charity gala picture from the late 1990s. My parents smiling beside several wealthy donors, crystal chandeliers, expensive dresses, perfect appearances. Then Daniel pointed quietly toward one specific person standing beside my mother. And suddenly, my chest tightened instantly, because I recognized him immediately. Dr. Leonard Pierce, a psychiatrist, not just any psychiatrist, the same man my parents suddenly contacted months earlier asking questions about psychiatric evaluations, only according to the date stamped on the photograph. They knew him decades before I was even born. And suddenly, everything shifted, because this wasn't random. This wasn't panic. This was connection, planning, history. Then Daniel handed me another document, a lawsuit archive, filed 23 years earlier against Dr. Pierce for helping wealthy families institutionalize adult daughters during inheritance disputes. I stopped breathing, because suddenly the psych ward threat became much darker than emotional manipulation. My parents knew exactly what they were trying to do, but the real horror came when I discovered I wasn't the first daughter they tried controlling this way. 3 days later, my Aunt Marianne called privately, terrified. "Your mother did this before," she whispered immediately. Silence filled my apartment instantly. "What?" And then she told me about my cousin Julia. 20 years earlier, Julia tried leaving her controlling fiancé after pressure from the family. Suddenly, everyone labeled her emotionally unstable, too emotional, too impulsive, too difficult. Eventually, she disappeared into a private psychiatric treatment facility for 7 months. And afterward, nobody spoke about it again. Because wealthy families don't erase scandals publicly. They bury them quietly. I felt physically sick hearing it, because suddenly I realized my parents weren't improvising with me. They were repeating a strategy, And honestly, that terrified me more than anything else. But then Daniel discovered financial records proving my parents had already started preparing legal conservatorship paperwork against me. The conservatorship paperwork changed everything because suddenly this wasn't emotional abuse anymore. It was calculated legal control. My parents secretly documented my behavior for months, tracked purchases, collected social media screenshots, saved private texts, building a narrative, carefully, like prosecutors preparing a case. And suddenly, every uncomfortable family interaction replayed differently inside my head. The invasive questions, the fake concern, the pressure. They weren't trying to reconnect. They were gathering evidence. Then Daniel uncovered the worst part. If institutionalized successfully, my parents planned temporary financial oversight for my protection, meaning control over accounts, property access, medical decisions, my entire adult life, all because I married someone they considered socially beneath them. And honestly, that's when fear finally turned into rage, because abusive families survive through silence. And I was done staying silent. So I sent one photograph to every person my parents spent decades trying to impress. I sent the email at 8:14 a.m. Monday morning. Recipients included church board members, charity committees, business associates, extended relatives, social groups, everyone my parents carefully performed perfection around for decades. Attached, the old gala photograph, the lawsuit records, the conservatorship documents, the psychiatric evaluator timeline, and one sentence. My parents attempted to institutionalize me for marrying someone they considered socially unacceptable. That was it. No dramatic speech necessary. Truth works best when evidence speaks quietly. The fallout happened fast. Very fast. My mother resigned from 2 charity boards within a week. My father's law partners quietly distanced themselves. Church friends stopped calling because image-driven people collapse publicly the moment respectability disappears, especially wealthy manipulative families. Dr. Pierce retired suddenly 3 months later, and my parents, they still insist they were trying to help. But honestly, that sentence means nothing to me anymore, because real help doesn't involve control. Real love doesn't require obedience, and healthy parents don't threaten psychiatric punishment when their children choose independent lives. Today, Daniel and I live quietly in Colorado, peacefully, far away from the family system that confused control with care for generations. And sometimes I still think about how close I came to losing everything simply because my parents couldn't tolerate losing authority over me. That's the terrifying thing about manipulative families. The abuse often hides behind concern so convincingly, even victims question themselves. Until one moment finally reveals the truth clearly. For me, that moment was watching my mother try removing my wedding ring while strangers evaluated my sanity, because suddenly everything became obvious. They didn't want me healthy. They wanted me obedient. And once I understood that, I stopped being controllable forever. Some families don't fear failure. They fear independence, because independence threatens control. and controlling people often disguise manipulation as love, concern, sacrifice, or protection. But real love never requires destroying someone's freedom to keep them close, especially your own child. And sometimes the most dangerous people in your life are the ones smiling politely while quietly building a cage around you, until one piece of evidence finally tears the whole performance apart.